You are listening to Leading the Factory Forward with your host, Lynn Friest. We share interviews with manufacturing experts and strategies for embracing the digital future, recruiting a new workforce, finding new business. Lynn is an advanced manufacturing strategist and leadership consultant who is on a mission to show manufacturing leaders how to improve their current operations while preparing for a digital future. And here's your host, Lynn Friest.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Leading the Factory Forward. We're now in part 2 of our digital leadership skills series. And so again, we're talking about Industry 4.0 and digital manufacturing. Now in this post, I'm going to share some of what I've learned about leadership in a digital manufacturing future. Now there are many ways leadership skills that can be described and many leadership skills that are needed. And we're going to take a look at 6 of them. But before we do, I want us to understand while we're talking about technology, you'll also find we haven't left the people skills behind. As I've said before, technology doesn't happen without the people. So the skills we're going to talk about today are a summary, but I wanted to first share some of the skills that other people have identified. So the Manpower Group, they identified the skills of vision, paradox, collaboration, diversity, and transformation. The McKinsey Group talked about having the skills of asking the right questions, digging for root causes, and connecting the organization goals to the individual's work. A book called The New Leadership Literacies focuses on the idea of both foresight, insight, and action. And then in a book called The Technology Fallacy, which deals with the people issues in technology adoption, they talk about having a transformative vision, being forward-looking, understanding technology, being change-oriented, having strong leadership skills, and being a collaborative team builder. 2 other things that come up quite often in these things are having, I'll say, digital fluency, in other words, understanding the digital landscape, and 2, what they call numerical literacy, understanding data, how it's used, how you can make use of it in a digital future. Now, in our next episode, I'll jump back and review some of the emotional intelligence competencies we talked about a couple of episodes ago, but specifically calling out those that I think are quite useful as we talk about digital transformation. So again, some of the key things. Leading has had some common skills that have lasted more than over thousands of years, but there are some new considerations. And so from all these possible skills I've talked about, here are 6 that I'd like to talk a little more about today. The first one being vision. The second one is understanding the technology landscape. The third one is building collaboration. The fourth is change leadership and management, and actually that will be the theme of a 4th episode in this series. Building talent is number 5. And 6, again, as mentioned just earlier, data and numerical literacy. So jumping into that first skill, number 1, vision. We're facing an explosion of connectivity over the next several years. Things will really change in ways we haven't necessarily predict or don't necessarily expect. With that connectivity will come velocity. But that velocity will also mean the speed of failure is happening more often. You as a leader need to look at what is your intent for the next few years. You won't have certainty, but you have to have some picture of what you're trying to do with your business over the next few years. Again, the world we have is going to be volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. What are some of the threats if we don't have a vision? Well, many companies are going to disappear over the next several years. They won't be able to see what's coming and they'll get blindsided by the future. And without a vision of what you want to become, you could simply become irrelevant in the new world of manufacturing. And finally, without a vision, you simply cannot engage your team in the journey that you're going to need to take. So what are a couple of the first steps to consider in terms of vision? Look for leading examples in your industry to see what they appear to be doing to create their future. See how it maps onto what you're trying to do. You might begin by just writing down what you'd like your organization to be like in 5 years. And then find some people to engage with, colleagues or others that can help you think about, what might be changing about how your work gets done and how could we, adjust to that, or what is it we want to be doing? Skill number 2 is understand the technology landscape. Again, you need to be developing a digital fluency. You won't be the expert at all these many different technologies, but you have to have a reasonable understanding of the technologies that are arriving in your industry and could apply to your workspace. You will need to spend time scanning publications and news to see what and where the technology is changing. And this could also require you to look globally, not just in markets near to you, because your competitors can come from anywhere and they could be adopting technology faster than we are here in the U.S. So what are the threats? You can get blindsided if suddenly your competitors are making or delivering your parts in new ways. Think of the ideas of 3D printing and other advanced manufacturing processes, or composite components that might replace your steel parts. You have to look at the value chain that you're currently using and how it could be entered by vigorous competitors from an adjacent space. Just an example, think of how all of a sudden Walmart ended up having some interest in banking. Well, what other people are doing things out there, they might jump into your space in the future. So what are some first steps? Again, there's an overwhelming amount of information, but you might subscribe to industry newsletters. That'll let you kind of scan the ideas. And then look for what's happening in firms that are up and down your supply and value chains. See what might be happening out there that could affect you. Skill number 3 is building collaboration. Well, if there's one thing we know, you can't know it all or even keep up all by yourself. You're going to need your team to help you with that. To rethink and reimagine your products and processes, again, you're going to need the whole team and their attention to try to figure this out as you move into the future. Another thing is you're going to become much more connected to your whole value chain as the connectivity and digitization takes hold. So what are the threats? If people aren't aware of the big picture, they can become fearful and disengaged. So if people don't know what's going to happen, they actually just get frozen. And then if there are any friction or bottlenecks in your communications, you can get left out of the value chain if people find it's hard to work for you. You have to be frictionless and easy to work with in the future. So what are some first steps you could take? You could hold some team meetings just to talk about what you see as the future and see what your teams have to say. See what they're wondering, curious, or concerned about. Look up and down your value or supply chain to see where new technology or practices are already being used. And maybe you could apply them, or maybe you have to at least look out for them. Skill number 4, change leadership and management. Again, we'll cover more of this in its own episode coming up. You will be changing all the time, and the path ahead is going to have twists, turns, and setbacks, so you have to be ready for this. Not only will you have to grow and learn, but also your people will have to. What are the threats? Well, again, as I mentioned earlier, fear and a lack of understanding often freezes the organization. And the next steps we'll get into in next episode. Skill number 5, building talent. With technology advancing quickly, traditional schools have a hard time keeping up. I always remember an IT guy, he said it did him no good to take classes because the leading edge information that he needed came from conferences. It hadn't been put into the schools yet. So again, think about how you can build talent. It may not always be classes, but it may be some. Think about that you already have valuable employees. You don't necessarily need to go out and hire new employees. You've got good employees. But how can you build their skills so they can, help you create the future? And again, this whole idea of better, faster, cheaper is probably going to be achieved by learning faster, not by simply working faster. What are the threats? Well, it's hard to hire the new talent you need. Any new talent you need will probably be in short supply and very expensive. And then you have to get used to the fact that building talent is not a one-time event, but a continual process. You hire some new skill today, but you'll need another new skill tomorrow. So it's really better to start thinking it as an upskilling process that you're always going to be involved in. What are first steps you could take? Well, you could start looking around to see how community colleges are teaching new skills. And again, there may be things out there that provide certifications in a particular skill that come quicker than degrees would in the past. So it may involve months of work or weeks of work rather than years of work to get skills that you're needing. And then simply ask your people. Some of them have probably been out learning new skills or would like to learn new skills, and you can just work with them and encourage them, letting them know what are the new skills that are needed in your organization. So skill number 6, data and numerical literacy. Well, we're already generating vast amount of data and using very little of it. We have it out there. We don't know what to do with it or even how to work with it. But the tools to analyze data are becoming better, cheaper, and easier to use. You think of the idea of Google Analytics. With a short YouTube video, you can get a good start on how to actually do that. Well, think about how that's going to be needed in your manufacturing operation. And then again, we need to use our experience to generate useful questions to ask the data. Just having the data isn't going to get us anything unless we have really good questions to ask about it. So what are the threats that we face? Competitors will have faster response times, they'll be able to fix problems faster, and they may not have problems at all because they've got the data that let them avoid it, and will be, still stuck with the same old things that'll make us slower. But we do have to learn what are the key questions to ask. The data will only be useful if we have good questions to try to solve key problems that make us better. What are the first steps? Well, start looking for articles and seminars to learn about data and analysis. Ask some colleagues in other industries how they're starting to use data, how they're learning to analyze data. And then you could ask some of your equipment suppliers, because often they're starting to upgrade their data analysis with their equipment and machinery. So ask some of them what they're now doing as far as providing data analysis for you. Well, that wraps up this episode. It finishes our brief overview of some key skills for digital leadership. It's certainly not the whole picture, but I think it helps set the stage for our journey on leading the factory forward into a digital future. Again, among the many skills needed to lead your factory forward, here's some to start considering. Number 1, vision. 2, understand your technology landscape. 3, build collaboration with your organization. 4, understand change leadership and change management. 5, building talent. 6, developing data and numerical literacy. Now, you can't work on them all at once, but have this list on your phone or computer or desk to check back on, and maybe you can start nudging yourself along in this road to improving your leadership skills. And then really stop and think, along with your people, where can you go to work on some of these things? Again, building talent, have your people help you start this journey. Having many heads trying to develop at once can often be a real plus for the organization. So now in the next episode, we're going to be looking at emotional intelligence competencies, and I'm going to try to pick out ones that clearly connect to becoming a digital leader. And then in the final episode of this series, we're going to talk about the principles of change management and what it's needed to help you, again, on your journey and your employees' journey. So in the show notes and on my website will be some additional resources that inform me in preparing this podcast and my thinking in general, and that, if you're interested, can help you with your development. Thanks for listening.